Go. All right. Official good morning to everyone and happy Monday. Good weekend? Yeah, it's okay. Anyone do anything fun? No. You slept? Okay, that's good. Did you also eat? Good, okay. We've got eating and sleeping covered. Did anything else fun happen?
I was watching a soccer match.
You watched a soccer match? That's good. Who played? Liverpool. And? Liverpool and Man?
Yeah.
Or did they play each other, or were it two separate games? Separate games? And who won? Not Liverpool?
Not Liverpool, not Man.
No, neither. Were you cheering for Manchester?
Who?
Were you cheering for Manchester?
I'm
No?
a Chelsea fan.
You're cheering for who?
I'm a Chelsea fan, so I was cheering for Tottenham.
Oh,
Hate Manchester United.
oh, okay.
Tottenham won.
Okay. So you were happy?
I was
Okay. Were you happy?
Liverpool lost 7-2.
7-2. Oh,
Liverpool lost 7-2.
that's a blowout. Yeah. But were you cheering for Liverpool? No?
Nah, I hate
No.
You hate them? Okay, so you were happy too? Okay. 7-2. Oof. All right. So soccer or football matches were watched. What else? Bananas were eaten. That it? Okay. So Clara's here. Good morning to you, Clara. Daniel's here. Good morning, Daniel. And Gabrielle is here. Hello to you. Vicky's here. Hello, Vicky. And I think Lindsay is here. And Mike is here. Good morning to you. Okay. So on Friday, what were we talking about Friday? Oh, we were talking about Adam Pearson. We were talking about good old Adam Pearson, right? And we said that Adam was a British man. We saw him in a documentary. And in many ways, he's quite, he's kind of your average guy, right? Your average white British guy. But of course, he has a pretty significant facial disfigurement. And we said that has influenced his life in quite a number of ways, right? We see that Adam and other people who Adam interviews that have disabilities, they are similarly discriminated against by society, right? And so we see a bunch of ways in which they're discriminated against. They are sometimes people outwardly, say hurtful things to them, but sometimes there's just some subtle discrimination. Some people don't want to sit near Adam. They might stare at him or be uncomfortable in his presence. And again, we said that a little bit of hesitance might be understandable for people because he does look pretty significantly different than most people do. But then it's very easy to go over the line and to make Adam feel uncomfortable or to hurt him, right? And so lots of people have done so, unfortunately. Avera asked a good question on Friday, and she said, what's the difference between a microaggression and maybe something that's not quite so micro, something that's not quite so small? And I think I kind of came up with an explanation on the spot, but I think it was kind of a good one. I think that microaggressions are ones that are statements or behaviors that are hurtful, but when you take them out of the context that they're happening in, they're not hurtful at all. They're not innocent, right? And so the classic, where are you from kind of thing, in a certain context with certain people, that can be a microaggression and that can be hurtful, right? But when you just print it out on paper, there's nothing hurtful there. It's just a very innocent question. And so microaggressions are the things that are very heavily dependent on the context. So it's who is saying the thing or who is doing the thing, who they are saying it to, and kind of the society and sort of cultural situation that exists. And so that's what makes them so difficult to identify, and that's what makes them so difficult to call out, because they are seemingly innocent and they are very easy to see as not a microaggression. And it's very difficult, I think, for people in minoritized groups to, I think, have to constantly think, oh, what did they mean by that? What did this person mean when they said this or did this? Was that, were they expressing a prejudice, or was it just an innocent question? And so these things can be difficult to identify, to put your, because what was the example you had, Avera, was, oh, you speak such good English or something like that, right?
No, like at the bar when they asked the guy in the wheelchair to do a wheelie, was that a microaggression?
Oh. Was that asking the guy to do a wheelie, was that a microaggression?
We said that she might have had a lot of drinks because we don't know what she will react.
It's true. It's true. She probably had a few drinks. That's not an excuse for her,
It's a wheelie.
She was asking him to kind of like pop up on his back wheels, so you can kind of. If you're in a wheelchair, some people can do that. They can sort of balance on an angle on two wheels, and it's kind of cool. And they can sort of roll around like that.
But like if you told someone on a bicycle to do a wheelie, that would be okay, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? Is the context, and so this guy's in a wheelchair, and again, she doesn't know him. Right? And she hasn't even, when she walks up, she doesn't even introduce herself, right? She doesn't say, hey, what's your name? Or, hey, my name's Susan, or whatever. Karen. She doesn't even introduce herself, right? She just walks up and says, hey, do this thing, right? And again, is it polite to walk up to people that you don't know and say, hey, do something, do a trick for me, dance, monkey, right? That's not polite, right? So I think, that could be a microaggression. It's pretty rude, right? In any scenario, it would be a rude thing. But again, would people say it to? Would she say that to most people, or does she just feel comfortable telling this guy what to do because he uses a wheelchair? Bless you. Right? That's the question. We said that we talked a little bit about the law, right? And we said that in the UK, there are laws about disability hate crimes. They exist, but often those rules don't really or those laws don't kind of get fully enforced or fully applied. And there was 3 reasons. Do you remember why?
The police don't record it as a disability because they don't get around.
Yeah, the police don't identify hate crimes as hate crimes because often they don't ask about someone's disability. And I think I said I was partially letting police off the hook for that because, again, that's our socialization. We are, and I can't speak for all of your socializations, but for my socialization and probably for the UK too, you're supposed to not point things out. You're not supposed to make a big deal. You're not supposed to say, hey, why are you in a wheelchair? You're not supposed to identify the disability, right? You're supposed to ignore it. That's the polite thing to do. And so the police are probably acting on their socialization and not asking about it. But the police also have a job to do, and they need to be trained to ask about these things, right? And so if the police don't include information about disability or indicate that this is a disability hate crime, then what doesn't happen? Yeah. The Crown prosecutors don't charge people with disability hate crimes. And again, judges can't convict people of crimes they are not charged with, right? So if they're not charged with a disability hate crime, they can't get convicted of one. So if lawyers or Crown prosecutors are simply saying, oh, it was an assault, then that's what the judge has to rule on. The judge can't change the charge before the court, right? That's not their job. And so the third part, of course, of that is that, again, judges don't hand down sentences for hate crimes because people aren't charged with hate crimes. They're charged with something less. And they're charged with something less because police are kind of dropping the ball a little bit and not indicating that this is a hate crime in the first place. So there's a few kind of levels to this where hate crimes aren't being properly punished, right? But the laws exist, but they're just not being used for this reason. But we said even when the laws are used properly, there's a difference in punishment, right? And so people with disabilities aren't, or people who commit a disability hate crime don't get punished to the same degree as people who commit a racially based hate crime or a religious hate crime or some other one. And we said that that's kind of problematic, right? Because if there are groups in society that need extra protection, they should be protected equally, right? You don't sort of pick and choose who you want to protect more and less, especially in terms of race or religion or whatever. And so everyone should have equal protection, but it seems in the UK, for whatever reason, they do not, right? Let's see. Oh yeah, and the psychology test. So what did the psychology test reveal about people at first, when they first took that computer-based test?
That they reacted to people with disabilities, disfigurement.
Yeah, so the test, the psychological test was designed to see if people had prejudicial ideas against people with facial disfigurements. And it turns out that, yeah, they kind of do, right? And some people were really surprised by their scores, right? They didn't think that they were prejudiced in that way, but the test seems to indicate otherwise, right? So again, what I want to point out here is that there is stuff going on under the surface for us that sometimes we are not entirely aware of, right? There are social messages that we've absorbed, prejudices that we might have, and we act upon those. Maybe I'll take a minute to, since we're talking about this, because I haven't mentioned it before, it should be said that that's a natural part of the way that humans operate, right? We do make judgments about people with our eyes, and sometimes that's a very useful thing to do, right? If let's say you're walking home, it's late at night, there's not a lot of people around, and you see someone walking on the sidewalk toward you, right? And so what does your brain do? Well, you scan him, right? Almost like Iron Man with the heads-up display, right? You kind of scan this person for their size and their gender and how they're dressed and how they look. Do they look dangerous? Do they not? Are they not? Should I cross the street? What should I do? Should I turn another way? Right? And so there's a certain amount of, sort of a survival skill or, keeping yourself safe. And we're all very used to doing this, right? We give people a quick scan to see if they are, if they're safe, if they're a threat or not. And sometimes we might cross the road, right? We might not like the look of someone and we cross the road just to be safe. And I think that's a very natural thing for humans to do. But, that our ability to do that can also have negative consequences as well, right? We can also scan and judge people and then behave toward them, again, without even really being aware. And I'm sure that in cases of, where you've kind of, been out late at night or you look at someone to see if, maybe you should cross the street, you probably do that almost automatically, right? Without even really thinking too much about it. You look at that person and see if they are, someone you want to walk by on the sidewalk or maybe someone that you want to avoid, right? So yeah, we do these things pretty instinctively. I think there's an evolutionary basis to being able to look at other human beings and see if they're a threat or not. I think that helps keep us safe. But again, that same machinery in our brain can be used to discriminate against people and have negative outcomes, right? So we saw that Adam eventually decided that the basis of that, or the outcome of that experiment indicated that prejudice can be changed, especially if you interact with someone to whom you are prejudiced against, right? And so he took a little comedy class and he you know, people thought he was funny, and so he decided to go to an open mic night at a bar and stand up there and tell some jokes. And turns out I think he was kind of funny, and the audience seemed to think so as well, right? And so he decided that maybe, you know, maybe this is something he could do to reduce prejudice in the population, is to go out and kind of get in people's faces, right? Tell some jokes, get them laughing, and that will decrease their amounts of prejudice. And again, the psychological test seems to indicate that it works, and so he's gonna try it, right? And that's a good thing for him to do. It doesn't fix everything, we said, but it's a good start, right? Okay. I wanted to come back to, I introduced this right at the end of our oppression and power little module. The idea that there were some external and structural dimensions of privilege. And I said I'll come back to that later because it makes more sense here, and it does. So we're saying ableism is the oppression of people with disabilities. And so one of the ways, I'm just going to jump ahead here. Okay, I will say this. I told you this before, but one of the ways that privilege works in oppression is that people with privilege kind of move through society and they don't feel that they have any sort of added benefit. They do, but it doesn't feel that way. And again, I made the metaphor of a fish swimming with the current, right? Like Dory here. The fish that swims with the current is never late because the current pushes the fish along and then they don't wind up being late for class. But if the fish is swimming against the current, then they're late. I know. I'm just giving you a hard time because I could use it in what I was talking about. It's okay. I'm just teasing. When the fish swims with the current, it doesn't feel it, right? And so to have privilege is to be able to move along through society and get where you're going, but you don't really feel that you have any particular advantage, right? And I can speak to that because I do have a lot of privilege in the society I live in, and I don't necessarily feel it, right? I don't really sense any advantage. People, you know, people don't give me any obvious benefits beyond just being nice to me, as we should all be nice to each other. But I also know that just because I don't feel it doesn't mean it's not there, right? Because people who don't have privilege will feel it, right? People will feel themselves swimming against the current in whatever way that kind of manifests. So, yeah, so there's external and structural privilege. So we'll talk about both of these, the external and the internal today. So external is the integration of dominant group norms into the structures of society. So the way that society actually operates, and even right down to the way that it is built, okay? So let me just see what my next slide here is. Oh, good, okay. So the way that society is built. So think about a bus, okay? So we've all been on a bus in Vancouver, yes? Probably, or at least seen one drive by. Buses are very common in Vancouver, but there are all kinds of barriers to taking the bus that if you have a disability, you can encounter, right? And so you've all sat in a bus seat, but if you imagine, what if you happen to weigh, I don't know, 400 pounds? Those seats are not necessarily made for you, right? They're barely made for me. I find I have to like kind of crunch up in them a little bit because they're kind of on the small side, right? But again, if you weigh 400 pounds, is taking the bus an option for you? Can you walk down that center aisle? Maybe not, right? The center aisle is kind of narrow on some buses. The seats are not made for you. And so you will experience barriers in that way. But that's okay, you don't have to take the bus, you can walk. But of course, if you weigh 400 pounds, walking is a lot of work, right? Even a short distance is a long way when you are carrying that amount of extra weight, right? You might be tired from walking, which would be understandable, carrying 200 pounds of extra weight. But can you sit down anywhere you want? No, why not?
You're too big. No chair big enough to fit you.
Right, and I'm gonna point this out, but it's not a bad thing. But when you said, oh yeah, you're too big, but of course you're only too big because society has decided what is too big. Okay, so society has decided what is normal and what's not normal, which is the second point, and you are deemed as outside of normal. You're too big, right? And so, yeah, you can't sit in any chair, right? Most chairs have a weight rating. Most chairs are weight rated for around 200 and a bit pounds, maybe like 225 or so. So if you weigh 400 pounds, you cannot sit on a chair. These ones are very sturdy, right? These are sort of commercial grade, solidly built chairs. They are meant to last like 20 years, these chairs. But you can't sit in them if you're 400 pounds. They're not going to support you. And think about the danger of sitting in a chair that is not weight rated for you. It could break underneath you, that would be humiliating, right? That'd be very embarrassing, but also dangerous, right? If a chair collapses out from under you, you're going to fall and you could hurt your head. Part of the chair might stick into you. I don't know. It could be quite dangerous to have a chair collapse out from under you. So not only do you have barriers on the bus, but walking is not feasible either, because walking is difficult when you weigh 400 pounds. And even if you're tired from walking, you can't sit anywhere you want either, because most chairs are not engineered to hold you, right? You need to order a special chair. And actually, I used to, before I did this job, before I got my education degree, I worked selling commercial office furniture, just like this. And yeah, what you need is called a bariatric chair. So you need a special chair that costs a lot more money, that is weight rated for 400 or 500 pounds. And you can order those chairs, but they cost a lot of money. They're wider than regular chairs, but not everyone has them, right? So even if you weigh that much, you can't sit down wherever you want either, right? So in terms of what's normal, because society defines what's normal, then they build society for quote unquote normal people, right? And so if you weigh 400 pounds, that is not normal, and therefore there's going to be barriers for you in society. There's going to be privileges that we all have because we are a quote unquote normal weight, although I know there's a medical biological element to that as well, but I'll just leave that aside for the moment. We have privilege in that regard, right? You can just hop on a bus and sit wherever you want, right? People who are 400 pounds cannot do that. I'm curious about who has an iPhone 11 or 11 Pro, or is 12 out yet? No, right? Next week? Yeah. Facial recognition, right? Ooh, it unlocked. That's a cool and spooky trick. However, I wonder, do you think that would work for Adam Pearson? Do you think the phone would recognize his face?
Probably. Yeah.
Maybe.
No, they don't recognize us with masks. How's it going to recognize us?
Right. So some things get in the way of the facial recognition, right? Definitely a mask will do it. I have a pair of sunglasses actually that when I wear them, it doesn't work either. I don't know why. Not all sunglasses do this, but I have a pair of Ray-Bans where if I'm wearing them, it doesn't recognize me. I don't know how that works. So I'm curious to know, if Adam Pearson had an iPhone 11, would it recognize his face as a face? And if it doesn't, how does that feel when your phone does not see your face as a human face, right? Awful, right? But again, you could see how that element of privilege would, you could see how Apple would create the software for the average human face and not think anything about someone like Adam. But then when Adam tries to program his facial recognition, the phone is kind of not allowing it to happen, right? And so you could see how that would, I don't know that it's necessarily a barrier, but it's certainly a way in which society is designed to work for us, but not necessarily for him, right? And you could extend that to hats. I assume most hats do not fit Adam's head. He's wearing glasses in that last clip we see him in, but I'm not sure that every pair of glasses is necessarily going to fit him either, right? So there's other things in society that are, how's he going to, can he pull on a sweater every morning without stretching out the neck? I don't know, right? So there's all kinds of things that are built for normal people that Adam is either going to struggle with, or that things that are not going to work for him, right? Yeah, this is another element of structural privilege, right? You and I can just step off the curb wherever we want to, right? But if you use a wheelchair, or if you use a walker or something like that, you need a curb cut, which is what these are called. We can take them for granted here, but they've only been part of the building, the sort of mandated in the building code since about the 1990s or so. So if you were in a wheelchair prior to the 1990s, these things didn't really exist. And so the question is, how are you going to get off the curb? Find a driveway somewhere? Maybe if you're young and cool, you might try to jump your wheelchair off, but that's not safe. What's that? People can help you, but that's difficult as well, because they have to be strong enough to actually lift you and the chair onto. Plus, you've got to ask someone every time you cross the street, and you can't cross the street alone, and you have to make sure there's someone on the other side, because once you're down off the curb, you have to get back up on the curb, and you don't want to be stuck in the street when the light turns. Awkward, right? Things that you and I just walk along and don't even notice, but this is a barrier for people who have disabilities in moving around. So yeah, this is what I mean in terms of dominant group norms are integrated into the structures of society. So society is built for people that society deems as normal, right? What color are Band-Aids? Kind of pinky, orange, fleshy kind of colored. But why are they that color? Because, what's that? Well, they're that color because they're supposed to blend into human skin, right? You're supposed to be able to put a Band-Aid on, and then it'll be not invisible, but not as noticeable, unless you get like the Avengers Band-Aids, but that's a different thing. But is everyone's skin the same color? Is everyone's skin that color? No. Are there black Band-Aids out there? I've never seen them. They're all the same color, right? Why are they that color? Because they're the color of the skin of the dominant group, right? What's a normal skin color? Well, apparently this is. I'm not saying it is, but apparently this is, because when we create Band-Aids to match people's skin, that's the color they all come in, right? And again, human skin is a variety of different shades. That's not the color that everyone is. And even if you look at numbers, most people on Earth have darker skin than that, right? That's not even the majority. The minority of people have skin of this color. Well, I don't know. I don't have any data on that. I might be wrong. So again, think about the ways in which society is built in a way that would disadvantage someone like Adam, right? Or someone who is significantly overweight, or someone who can't see or can't hear, right? And again, we have accommodations made for people like that, right? So outside these rooms, I think you'll see that there's Braille outside of the room, right? So they can read, you can read what room number this is. And so we've made accommodations, right? Buses have those little bzzzt ramps that go down so that people in wheelchairs or with little scooters, they can get onto the bus. And the bus will actually kneel as well, right? The bus comes down. Some buses actually speak and say, you know, what route they are. So people who can't see can actually hear the bus and know which one it is. So we have made accommodations, but is society designed for people with disabilities? No, we've just modified society a little bit. Yeah, Henry? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, but again, society is built in a way that advantages the dominant group and disadvantages, in some cases, the minoritized group. The construction of what's normal and not normal by the dominant group. So we said, that, people who are 400 pounds are too big for a chair. So who defines how big is too big and where is the line, right? Or maybe with Adam's face, right? I think we could probably all agree that Adam's face is outside of what society considers normal, right? Could we agree on that? Yeah. But where is the line? Where is the line between a normal face and a not normal face? Because if you think about it, Adam's face has two eyes and a nose and a mouth, and the eyes are where he sees from, and he breathes through his nose, and he talks with his mouth, and he's got two ears, and his nose and his ears are a convenient place for his glasses to rest. And so, yeah, come on in. So Adam's face does a lot of the same things that our face does. He has all of the same parts of a face that we all have. His face is located in the same place as our face, right on the top of our neck. So his face and my face are quite similar. And in fact, I was going to use Steve Carell here. Steve Carell's face and Adam's face have all of the same features, right? A nose, a mouth, two eyes. They're both wearing glasses. They both styled their hair in some way. But most people would imagine Steve Carell's face to be a normal one, and most people would agree that Adam Pearson's face is not a normal one. But again, where's the line, right? Where's the line between normal and abnormal, and who gets to decide, right? How do we decide who fits in the dominant group and who does not, right? And so here, again, these are two pretty extreme examples. Adam's face is very clearly outside of what most people would agree is a normal human face. Steve Carell here, this is a very normal face. Some people think it's a very handsome face. But again, where's the line between normal and not normal? And who gets to say? Yeah, so as part of the dominant group here, we are granted privileges, right? And so one of the privileges in society for people with a quote-unquote normal face is that you can walk around and people don't stare at you, right? Unless you happen to be, incredibly beautiful. Most people just kind of look at you and then look away, right? You're like, oh, there's another normal human. Yep, there's another one too. There's one over there. Yep, there's another normal human, right? Nobody looks at you twice, really. But people look at Adam twice, maybe three times. Maybe sometimes they stare at him, right? So you and I enjoy the privilege of most people not really paying too much attention to us as we walk through the world, right? We can walk through, and most people ignore us, which is kind of nice, right? That's a privilege that actually probably neither of these men enjoy, right? Because when Adam Pearson walks through the world, people take a second look at him and a third look and maybe stare. And Steve Carell is a big star. And so when Steve Carell walks through society, people stare at him as well because he's famous, right? So neither of these guys have the privilege of being able to just walk through society and be ignored by everyone, but for different reasons, right? So we have this privilege of being able to just walk through society and have nobody pay too much attention to us, right? And again, sometimes we might want people to pay attention to us, but I think given the context of maybe Adam Pearson, I think we can all agree that it's nice, right? It's nice to be able to just walk down the street and nobody pays too much attention to you, right? You can just go about your business without people staring at you. That's nice. And it should be that way for Adam as well. But as we saw, it probably isn't that way for him, right? And again, just because his face falls outside of what we see as normal, right? And again, but who gets to decide that? The last one, of course, is invisibility. And so again, some of the things that I pointed out in terms of privilege, so your ability to walk through the world and cross streets and go upstairs and walk down the street without anyone paying attention to you, really, those are all privileges that we enjoy that people in this disabled social group don't always enjoy, right? But again, that privilege is mostly invisible to you, right? Do you notice when you walk down the street and nobody pays attention to you? No, you're just walking down the street, right? You don't notice it. But does Adam notice it when he walks down the street and everyone's staring at him? He definitely does, right? So again, you don't notice privilege when you have it, but when you don't have it, it becomes very clear to you, okay? All right, so privilege also has these internal and attitudinal effects. And so we're going to talk about this in just a few minutes. Let's talk about them. So there's kind of 5 of them. One of them is that people in a dominant group often believe that their group has a right to their position. Okay, so they're in the dominant group and they feel that that is the way it should be, or they feel it's just the natural way of things. Okay, and I'll give you we'll have some examples of this in a minute. Another part of an internal part of privilege is that people internalize messages of the dominant group's superiority. And of course, all people in society do this, but we'll see this played out in a minute as well. Often people in dominant groups don't know a lot about people in minoritized groups, but it doesn't really bother them either, right? It doesn't really bother them that they don't really know anything about the minoritized group. And so we kind of see that happening in the documentary with Adam Pearson, with the woman talking to Dan, the war veteran in the wheelchair. She doesn't seem to know too much about, the fact that he's in a wheelchair. She feels he's kind of stuck in it. She doesn't really know about his legs. She doesn't even ask his name. So she doesn't really know too much about Dan, and she doesn't really seem to want to know anything about him either. All she wants to see him do is a wheelie, right? So she doesn't just do the thing, right? Just do the thing that I know you can do. I don't really care about your name or your story or why you use a wheelchair or anything about you. Just, do the thing that I know that you do, right? And again, there's this invisibility of privilege thing. So I have a short story for you to read. It's a very short one. It's like a page and a half. It is entirely fictional, as you will no doubt notice once you start reading it. And in it, you will see a number of external or structural elements of privilege, and you'll see some internal or attitudinal elements of privilege as well, okay? And so what I'd like you to do, and I'm just going to double check to make sure that this is in Teams. I'm almost certain that it is, but just to make sure. So if you look in Microsoft Teams under Files, you will see it. Yeah, you'll see it. It's called Internal and Attitudinal Dimensions of Privilege. So there's this very short story. So what I'd like to do is give you maybe 8 minutes to read over it and try to pay attention to the elements of privilege that you see between the two groups, okay? And it'll become very obvious what groups they are. Yes, George? It is called Internal and Attitudinal Dimensions of Privilege. That's what it's called. Okay, so let's take 8 minutes and read, and then we'll talk about what we see, okay? Okay, people. Two-eyed people. Huh? It's weird? It is weird, but also is it? No, it's not that weird. Yeah, so weird but not. Do you want to take a quick break and then come back and we'll talk about this three-eyed, two-eyed thing? Okay. Take a break, come back in 10, and we'll talk about it. Okay, and we are back. So, I'm going to get rid of the counter. So, weird little story, right? Weird little story. Obviously, there's no three-eyed or two-eyed people. But, again, weird, but also not weird, right? There was things in there that maybe we have experienced or seen or felt or done, hopefully. And so that's kind of the point of the story, right? So what do we see in terms of external and structural dimensions of privilege? So remember, the external ones are that society is kind of designed to benefit people in the dominant group in kind of real ways. The idea of what is normal and not normal is constructed by the dominant group. And then the invisibility of privilege, I think, was the third one. So where do we see this, the external ones, in this story?
The program of the movie is made with people with 3 eyes so that the person in front of them.
Right. So our narrator of the story, or our main character, I think it's a she. What's that? Yeah, it is a she, yeah. So she goes to a theater to see a play. She sits down. She gets the program that tells you what the play is about and has biographies of the actors and all kinds of things. And she notices that it's kind of printed in a weird way that assumes that you have a third eye, so the person behind you can read it at the same time as you can. But of course, this person only having 2 eyes, she's a little confused, and she's trying to figure out the order in which to read it. So yeah, that program is created in a way that assumes that you have 3 eyes, right? So yeah, that's a structural privilege, right, that she doesn't have, and she's kind of confused by this strange thing. What else is there? Other structural elements of privilege, or external ones?
The doctor approaches and says that let's fix you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the doctor approaches her and says, "Hey, I can implant a third eye in the back of your head. Don't you want to be normal?" Right? So again, you have that element of to have 3 eyes is normal, to have 2 eyes is weird, right? But he can fix her and make her normal. What else? Yeah, the sunglasses, right? The sunglasses have a lens in the back, and of course, are those ones cool or not cool? Those are the cool ones, right? The very fashionable ones. Those are the ones with 3 lenses, right? And so, what does our narrator do?
She picks it up and then the saleswoman takes it away from her.
Right. So the saleswoman takes them away and guides her over to the ones with only 2 lenses, which are not cool, right? They're the blue blockers of the sunglass world. They're not cool at all, right? So here we see the coolest, most fashionable sunglasses are made with 3 lenses. The sort of not so cool ones are with 2 lenses. That kind of stinks. We'll talk about the saleswoman in a minute. Other structural things. What's that? Yep, the menu at, well, I don't know. Is there anything weird about the menu, or is it just on the wall? It's just on the wall. The cashier asks if she needs her to read it to the person. But I think that's an internal thing. I think that's kind of almost a microaggression thing. I don't think I think the menu is fine. It's just that the cashier or the waitress says something about it. Okay, so we've got the glasses. We've got the program at the theater. We've got the doctor, right? The construction of what's normal and not normal. The
children crying.
Oh yeah, the children. Yeah, because the little child is scared because the little child thinks that's not normal, right? So the little, was that yours too, Aliana? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the kid cries because she has been socialized, right? This little child has been socialized to either not know about people with two eyes or to see people with two eyes as scary, right? And so she cries because she's been socialized that way. Of course, you and I would probably cry if we saw someone with a third eye in the back of their head, but that's our socialization, right? Here, things are the reverse. What about some of the internal or attitudinal ones? And maybe I'll just put those back up there so we can see them. Yeah, a lack of humility, and that's, yeah, probably a few things, right? The idea that that's not normal, this lack of humility, and maybe the second one too, in terms of superiority versus inferiority, right? Imagine how terrible it would be to be born with only two eyes, right? Which I'm sure we can all agree is terrible, right? Life is barely worth living with with only two eyes, is it not? Terrible. But that's the social message that is acted upon, right? The idea that to have three eyes is normal and superior and good, and to have only two, ugh, can you imagine being born that way? Ugh, your life must be tragic, you know. Don't you want to be fixed, right? Don't you want to be normal like everyone else? So you see some of that happening in the sunglass store. What else do we see? Or it's a theater production, right? It's a play. Yeah. What about that is?
The main character loses his third eye and has to deal with the disfigurement and all.
Yeah. So the story, this play is about someone a character, a real life person maybe, who loses their third eye, and you know, even though this is quite tragic, and how could their life ever go on without their third eye, they bravely struggle and fight, and you know, it's a heroic feel-good story of someone who triumphed over the odds with only two eyes, right? And so again, it sounds ridiculous for us, but are there stories out there like that? Yeah, about people who overcome disabilities? Yeah, and so this is a bit of a tricky one to talk about, but still, what they're pointing out in here is the idea that the way this play is created, it's that this person losing their third eye is like, oh, their life is barely worth living, right? Why would you ever want to go on if you couldn't, you know, if you didn't have a third eye? And who's the role being played by? Yeah, a normal person, someone with three eyes. And so they're representing the experience of this person with two eyes that they may not really know about. And he wins an award for it nonetheless, right? You could probably, what would you want to compare that to in kind of real life? Yeah, I saw a trailer come out the other day. I don't know if it's a movie or a Netflix movie, but it's with what's her name from Riverdale? Who's the girl with the red hair on Riverdale? Madeline Petch. Yeah, she's in a new movie, and it's kind of a thriller movie, and it's called Sightless. And so her character loses her sight. She goes blind. And I won't give away too much. You can watch the trailer if you want. But that whole experience is scary and awful for her, right? So, you know, imagine how awful and terrifying it would be to not be able to see. And so it's interesting. You can see, you know, again, depending on how the movie goes, you might be able to interpret it a few ways. But the way that the trailer reads, you can very clearly see that social message of, oh, to be blind must be just frightening and awful, and what a horrible thing to happen to you. And again, you know, I wouldn't want to lose my vision either. I like it and enjoy it. But that doesn't mean that people who do not have their vision, it doesn't mean that their lives are over, right? Or that their experiences, you know, in society is terrible and, you know, unbearable. But again, after the class, I invite you to watch the trailer and see what you think. But because that's the feeling I got from it was, oh gosh, her losing her sight was this terrible, frightening, you know, awful experience, right? And again, there might be some truth to that, but it's interesting to think about, is that social message underneath? What else do we see? Other internal ones. Yeah. So microaggression? Yeah. So, because again, if you take that out of context, that's a perfectly innocent phrase, right? There's nothing wrong with that phrase. Do you want me to read it to you? Is a natural thing to say in some context. But here, it's happening in a society where three-eyed people are the dominant group and two-eyed people are the minoritized group. There's lots of messages of superiority of three-eyed people and inferiority of two-eyed people. And it probably matters how the person says it as well, right? You know, would you like me to read it to you? Or do you need me to read it to you? Different delivery, right? So a lot of things are, it's very context dependent. It depends who says what to whom, and it depends on how they say it as well, right? So that's what makes these microaggressions so tricky, is that in a different context, it's fine, right? There's nothing wrong. But in another context, there is something wrong. And so I think the way that this is written here, you should probably read it as, you know, do you need me to read it to you? Like, almost like a message of, ugh, this two-eyed person, they can't even read, right? But she can read, right? It's just that that structural privilege means that it's a very difficult thing for her to read because it's not made for her. It's made for people who are different from her. Other internal elements? So Gabrielle says, casting the three-eyed person as a two-eyed person instead of an actual two-eyed person. Yeah, what does this remind you of? Yeah, what did they gave it a fancy name. What did they call it? Started with a W. Did anyone, does whitewashing ring a bell? Whitewashing is what you do when you like paint a fence white. They call it whitewashing. But here in Hollywood, they were saying, you know, giving roles that should belong to people of color or sort of more diverse people, those roles are being given to white people, right? Do you remember some examples of that?
The main character has an Asian neighbor upstairs, but it is portrayed, I think, like played by a white guy.
In Breakfast at Tiffany's? Okay, I haven't seen that in a long time, so I'll take your word for it. And it's stereotypically, yeah, there's heavy stereotypes in how they're, yeah. So you definitely see, yeah, so Breakfast at Tiffany's, I guess, is one. What is? Gone with the Wind is super racist. But the time that the movie was made and the time that the movie is set in is also super racist, so, but you're right. What else? There was the one with Scarlett Johansson. What was it? Is it Ghost in the Shell? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's the right name.
That's, yeah. So that was an anime graphic novel, right? Like a Japanese anime graphic novel that they turned into a movie, and then of course the lead character is, I think, supposed to be Japanese, but played by Scarlett Johansson, a very clearly non-Japanese actor. Other examples of this? There was, what's the character in Doctor Strange or Avengers that, you know, it's like the woman who teaches Doctor Strange how to do all his stuff? Do you remember what her character name is?
Master or something.
Grand Master or Master, whatever her name is. Yeah, she's in the comics, she's an old Asian man, I think, in the comics. But in Avengers Endgame, she is a white woman. And so lots of people stood up and said, hey, you know, you're whitewashing. You're taking this role that really should be played by an Asian man, and now a white woman is playing it. She didn't get a lot of pushback for that, but some people commented on it. What else? Other examples of whitewashing?
So I think there's gonna be a new Ariel movie, but then in the cartoon she was like a white skin, but in the new movie they're gonna make it's like a darker skin.
And that's who?
I don't know who it is. But
Oh.
it's like a new Ariel movie. I heard it.
Well, and that's what you're seeing, right? Is that now you're seeing things shift the other way, and so they're actually reimagining some roles for more diverse people, right? To sort of rectify that imbalance.
Have you watched the movie God of Egypt?
Say again?
Have you watched the movie God of Egypt? Like Egyptian gods?
I don't think so.
Like many people feel they don't like this movie because they choose white people to cast for Egyptian gods. Like they Egyptian, but they choose white people, like British people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've seen that, and definitely in the past, it's been pretty grossly done, and with lots of stereotypes mixed in. But even today, you know, it's becoming less popular now because of a backlash. But again, you saw lots of roles that people of color really should have been playing go to white actors, right? And so there was another one. This is the last one I'll say. It's what's that? What's the instance in West Side Story? Yeah. This is ringing a bell. Is it a character that should be Jewish? I'd have to look into that one. The one I was thinking of was there's a movie that I think is called Up in the Air, where there's a character who is. No, it's Emma Stone. No, okay, sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong one. Shoot, what is the name of that movie? Aloha. Yeah, where Emma Stone's character is she's half Japanese, I think, or half Hawaiian, and she looks like very white, red hair. So you're like, okay, well, if she's supposed to be half Asian, where is the half Asian? I don't see any, and there isn't any, right? So again, is she the best choice for that character? Anything else we see? Didn't need one, yeah. So she was given a cane in the theater even though she didn't need one. Why did they give her one anyway?
I think there are two reasons. Like one is the lack of humility. They don't understand. They just assume that, oh, you lack a third eye. You can't make your way around here.
Right.
The other they mentioned in the story was to distinguish her.
Yeah.
Separate.
Yeah, there's two things. So it seems like there's a lack of humility. The people with three eyes don't really know what the two-eyed people can and can't see, but they're not really too interested in finding out. They just assume that, oh, well, they just can't see anything. And yeah, that cane alerts other people to her difference, right? It's a visual thing that shows that you're not one of us, right? And you could probably say that of the sunglasses as well, right? So if you wear the two-person sunglasses, that pretty clearly shows that you're not one of us. The stylish sunglasses, those are for the three-eyed people, the normal people.
And when the teenagers say, why should all two-eyed people be rude and angry?
Yeah. And why are they so rude and angry, those two-eyed people?
Because they ask them what happened to you very directly for each time they see them. So
Yeah. And not only that, but this character in the story here, she's dealt with a series of microaggressions all day long, right? So she came out of her neighborhood, and then people were staring at her, and children were crying, and doctors were trying to fix her, and the cashier didn't want to touch her hand when giving her change. And, she had this kind of unfortunate exchange in the sunglass shop, and these kids are making fun of her. And then she goes to this play, and in the play, the message is, people, to have two eyes is this tragic, awful thing. Why even continue to go on? And so, yeah, of course she's annoyed, right? Because she's getting hit all day with messages that people don't accept her, right? Or that there's something wrong with her, or that she's less than everyone else. And so, yeah, of course she's a little annoyed by the end of this, right? And this is just one day, right? Imagine someone who's in a minoritized group who lives more than one day, right? Who has to get up every morning and deal with this kind of stuff, right? It's exhausting. And that's part of privilege as well, is that people in the dominant group don't have to do all this, right? They don't have to face rejection just because they don't have a third eye, right? They don't have kids cry at the sight of them. They don't have teenagers making insensitive comments in stores, right? They don't have to watch movies that shows them that, their life is not worth living, right? And so, yeah, part of privilege is that you don't have to deal with that stuff. But as a member of a minoritized group, you do, right? And again, it's exhausting, right? Because this is just one day, and it's every day, right?
So being given a cane, is it like external or internal?
Tough one. Because the cane itself is an external thing, but she doesn't need it. And the only reason they give it to her is because they think she needs it, and she doesn't.
Can it be a mix of both?
I would say it's not. I would say because the cane itself is, how do I explain this? I think when we talk about external and structural elements of privilege, we're talking about the ways in which society is designed for people in the dominant group. And so the cane doesn't really fit into that. It's an accommodation that allows someone to get around in a society that's not built for them. But the reason she's given it has to do with an internal thing. And again, the fact that she doesn't need it at all probably, yeah, I think it's more of an internal thing. But it's a physical object, of course. Yeah, I would say it's an internal one. Anything else? Oh, there's another structural one. It's right at the beginning of this story. It's right at the beginning of this story. What happens at the very beginning?
She was brought up in a close community separated from the rest.
Right. So two-eyed and three-eyed people don't live together, do they? No, they live in separate communities. The three-eyed people don't want to live next door to the two-eyed people. So the two-eyed people live in totally separate communities, right? So society is actually organized in such a way that separates out two and three-eyed people. Is that good for breaking down prejudice? No, right?
I didn't even know that they exist. Like, because she was shocked when she saw through that.
Right, and I don't know what's behind that. I think that's kind of a device for the story so that she experiences all these things for the first time. I think that's, I don't know how, if this story was longer, I don't know how they would explain such a thing. But one way or the other, they live separate, right? They don't live next door to each other. Society is designed to keep those two-eyed people in their own community, right? Away from the three-eyed people. Anything else? Anything we missed? A lot of things happened pretty quickly.
Some boss's store, when she left, the salesperson said, "Why would she even come here in the first place?"
Yeah. What's happening there?
Basically, they don't understand why the needs of two people, I guess, and like the minority,
Yeah. Again, right? Sorry. Keep going. Right. So, yeah. So the idea of, you know, why would she even come here anyway, right? So doesn't she know her place? Doesn't she know that the store isn't for her? Doesn't she know that these sunglasses are not for her? Ugh, two-eyed people. They're so dense, right? You can almost hear them thinking those kind of things when we know, of course, that our character is none of those things. You know, she has every right to be in the store. She apparently has money to buy the sunglasses. If she wears the three-eyed sunglasses, there's no harm, right? There's a lens in the back, but it doesn't matter. It's not hurting anyone. But yet, the sort of superiority comes through, right? And she's just like, oh, why would she even be in here anyway, right? You can hear that very strong prejudice toward people with two eyes, even though this person with two eyes is doing nothing wrong and understands the situation, right? They understand that these glasses are not made for them. They get it, but there's no harm in wearing them, right? Especially if you want to look fashionable, which she does. Anything else? Okay. So I think we've got most of these things, right? So the external ones, the sunglasses for sure, the theater program. I've got enforced cane use on there, but I think now that we've talked about it, I think I might want to remove it because I think it's more of an internal one. Although, yeah. The surgery to make someone normal is probably an external one. The fact that surgery exists means that, yeah. And then the segregation of the communities, right? They live apart. And again, the internal and the attitudinal ones, we've identified all those as well. Maybe the only one is the woman sort of leading her away from the sunglasses, right? It's kind of a public property thing, or like you wouldn't just drag people away from the thing that they're looking at in order to show them what you think is their things, right? So most salespeople won't do that. Most people will let you buy whatever you want, but in this case, she's kind of steered away from the things that belong to the dominant group. Okay, so we got all that stuff. Oh, I don't want to talk about that until tomorrow. I want to show you one more thing. Whoops. I want to show you one more thing. And it is this. Okay.
Hi, I'm Brett Count.
Okay, so here's what we'll do. For people who are online, I'm just going to pop this video link into Microsoft Teams. And I'm just going to let you watch it, and then we'll come back to it tomorrow, okay? So online people, watch the video, and then you'll be done for today, and tomorrow we'll come back and deal with it, okay? So I'm going to sign you off now, and I'll see you tomorrow, okay? So bye.